All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our first virtual Meet the Newly Elected Officials event. I'm Lori Richards, and together with my partner, James Madlam, we'll be hosting today's event. So quick overview of why we're doing this, because here at Miller Communications, we understand the value in our role of being involved with both city and county government. We believe in the importance of being engaged and involved with our local representatives. We've been hosting these events over the past decade. You may have come to one of these with us in person at Miller Communications, either with local elected officials or with new members of the media. And we thought it was really important to keep doing this even in a virtual era, because these have been great opportunities to foster engagement with our local elected officials, encourage civic participation, and help keep ourselves and our clients informed both about what accomplishments are happening at the city and county level, as well as what some of the challenges are and how we may be able to help address those moving forward. So no doubt this spring has brought no shortage of challenges and changes in our world, in both the form of COVID-19, as well as the elevated national conversation around race, which Milwaukee has struggled with, candidly, in local years as well. And I think it's brought a new elevated level of attention to making sure that we continue to talk about and address. So this is just one of the many, many reasons, as someone who loves Milwaukee, I'm so excited to present this group of dynamic young leaders with you all today, and have a deeper conversation about what's ahead for both our city and our county. So a quick round of introductions, and I'll kick it over to James. But representing both the city and the county of Milwaukee, we're pleased to have with us today new county executive David Crowley. David, thank you for being here. New county board chairwoman Marcelia Nicholson, thank you for joining us. And common council president Chevy Johnson. Chevy, thank you for being with us as well.
Great. Thanks, Lori, and thanks for everybody who's joined us here today. Well, we wish we were all meeting in person at our offices as we traditionally would do this event. We're thrilled to have you join us virtually. We have provided each of the panelists today with a list of all of our attendees. At Miller Communications, as Lori shared, we are so proud to work with individuals and organizations that share our commitment to and pride in our great community. And that includes so many of you that have joined us today virtually. Thank you for being here and being part of this dialogue and discussion. And it certainly includes as well our great panelists. Thank you for being with us and joining us today. So quick rundown of our agenda. We are going to start by having each of the panelists introduce themselves and share a little bit about the path that led them to their current role. We will then begin a moderated discussion that Lori and I will lead, inclusive of the questions that some of you have submitted in advance. There is also an opportunity for you to add questions to the dialogue and discussion throughout today's session. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but at the bottom of the screen, there is a Q&A button. Feel free to add questions at any time. We'll be monitoring that, and we will incorporate that into the dialogue and discussion with each of our panelists. So without further ado, we'd like to begin things with County Executive Crowley. Why don't you introduce yourself, share a little bit about your background and how you got to this position at this incredibly unique moment in time.
Let me unmute myself. So first and foremost, thank you for having us, James and Lori. This is a wonderful opportunity to be with some other dynamic leaders here within the city of Milwaukee County. But again, my name is David Crowley, newly elected county executive. Born and raised here in the 53206 zip code. The famous zip code is for being one of the most highest incarcerated zip codes here in the country. I went to public schools my whole life, as well as UW Milwaukee, and started off as a community organizer before getting involved in politics in 2010. And so I always say thank you to Russ Feingold. I had the opportunity to work for his campaign in 2010 and stuck with politics. It was something I was definitely interested in, and people told me that I was good at. And so I worked in politics for a couple of years before I decided to run myself. I am a former state representative, former chair of the Milwaukee delegation, former chair of the Wisconsin Black Legislative Caucus, and recently elected to the Milwaukee County executive seat. I am the first African-American to be elected to the seat and the youngest. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much, and thanks for being with us. Now, Chairwoman Nicholson.
Thank you. I'm very honored and privileged to be here and to be able to be here with you all. Like the county executive, I was also born here in Milwaukee in the 53206 zip code. I also attended Milwaukee Public Schools and the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. A little bit of a different path. I didn't get involved in politics until much later. The first time I voted was actually for President Obama. I became a school teacher, so I taught at Milwaukee Public Schools. I wanted to give back like my teachers gave to me, being the first person in my family to graduate from college. I then started working on campaigns. I was so inspired by Barack Obama that I started to volunteer on campaigns, and I was loud and vocal enough that folks told me I should run for office. It was something I thought that I was never qualified to do, but you know, I won with 65% of the vote. In 2016, I got elected to the county board, and 4 years later, I ran for the chair position. So I'm just really honored to be here and be able to give back to the community that grew me and the community that I love, and I'm very excited to be here with you all.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And President Johnson.
Great. Well, thank you, James, and thank you everybody at Miller Communications for putting this on. I'm always excited to be in a room and get the chance to share the stage with Marcelia and with David, my friends who are amazing, amazing leaders. And I'm so excited to see what those two and myself, all three of us, are able to do now and into the future. How I got here started off about 20 years ago. I got involved in a pre-college program at the YMCA called Sponsor a Scholar. The goal of that program was to get low-income students in Milwaukee Public Schools, kids who lived in 53206 like I did growing up, given an opportunity for those kids to go off to college and be the first people in their family to go off to college. And I did that. I went to UW-Madison, studied political science. The other part of that program was to get those same kids involved in community service and giving back. And I know as a 14-year-old boy, you know, waking up on Saturday mornings, people generally don't like, going to do community service projects, but I just fell in love with serving this community. And I stayed on that track. I learned about politics back in 2001, that was the track that I wanted to go on. Actually, September 11th is what kind of pushed me in that direction, where I realized that I could have a career where I get up every single day and serve people. And I just stayed on the track all through college. My first time voting for president as well was for President Obama in 2008. I think all of us remember where we were when that happened. I was in Madison when that happened. Stayed on the path. I ran unsuccessfully for the Milwaukee County Board twice, including in the seat that is currently represented by the chairwoman. So luckily, I'm glad I did. Now she's there. So unsuccessfully twice there, but stayed at it, knew that I wanted to continue serving this way. Got recruited to come into Mayor Barrett's office to serve the community in that way. In 2016, another opportunity to run presented itself, and I ran for alderman. And 4 years later, I ran for council president and was able to win that election as well. And so now we're here.
Well, terrific. Well, we're thrilled that you're here as well, and we're thrilled that all three of you are here on this panel. Lori, I'll turn it over to you for our first question.
Sure. First of all, I want to say it's really amazing to hear each of your background stories and what inspired you to a career in public service. Kind of want to put a pin in that and maybe come back to it later in our conversation, but also applaud each of you for raising your hand to help lead in the face of challenges in the city of Milwaukee and in Milwaukee County. So, and you all, I wanted to note that you all did so before 2020, right? When things got measurably more difficult. So let's start there for a moment. Would love to hear from each of you about individually, either the city or county's response to COVID-19, how it's impacting local budgets, and maybe one thing that we can take away or learn from this moving forward. So County Executive Crowley, if you would be so kind to kick it off.
Oh, absolutely. So this has had a huge impact on Milwaukee County when you think about our budget. So right now, we're expecting about a $100 million loss in revenue, and we're expecting about a $450 million impact to Milwaukee County's budget. We have received some dollars. So just to take you back with the timeline, we were slated to receive $165 billion from the federal government as it relates to CARES. The funding formula changed, and so what ended up happening, Milwaukee County received $62 million, and the state ended up receiving about $2 billion. And so we were looking, within that $2 billion allocation was the $103 million that was cut from Milwaukee County. And so we received 62 from the feds, and we ended up receiving about 15 from the state of Wisconsin. And so when we think about what we're doing right now, this is really about making sure that we have a healthy community, because that's the only way to make sure that we have a healthy economy. And so we have done everything that we can to try to minimize the impact that COVID-19 has had on Milwaukee County, whether you're talking about work share plans, furloughs. We've seen cuts up to about $60 million up until this point. And we know that we have to continue to look at our budgets as we move forward, because we still don't understand the financial implications that this is going to have long term. And so but we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we stay ahead of the curve and making sure that we can continue to provide these critical services for our most vulnerable population.
Marcelia, do you want to jump in next?
Thank you so much. So I'll echo all the county executives said and add that I think our response has also included leading on and really being an example at the county on how to promote public health. Our county executive didn't mention this, but he participates in a daily briefing that's now gone to 2 days a week, where we share regular information with our constituents around what we're doing to maintain and promote safety. Things like washing your hands, maintaining distance, wearing a mask. That's really important, because I think the reason why this pandemic grew to the depth that it did was because there was a front end deficit on public health information. And so being very intentional about that, and then just making sure we are holding Milwaukee County to those same standards and applying those within our own departments and for us at the board level. If many of you are engaged, I think some of you may even participate in some of these meetings, we hold virtual meetings so that we can maintain that social distance and remain safe. In regards to revenue loss, we really are being hit hard. We have a recent projection of over 100 million in revenue loss, which is about 10% of our regular budget. But the unfortunate part is that this isn't really new for us at Milwaukee County. Each year we experience a deficit, and we're entering each budget year with a $20 to $30 million gap, which means that's $20 to $30 million worth of services and offerings that we can't provide anymore. And I guess the takeaway would be we have been pleading with our state legislature for over a decade on supporting our need for shared revenue. And I think this has only revealed that when we're doing that, when we're in Madison, when we're pleading to give us more tools to raise revenue, that you listen to us, because these pandemics only exacerbate the problems that we already have.
Great, thank you. And for city perspective, Chevy?
Yeah, and thank you for that. I first want to thank Milwaukee County, actually, because it's Milwaukee County that really has led the charge in terms of having a community-wide response, because all of us know that the impacts of coronavirus are not contained to one neighborhood or one municipality. And Milwaukee County has done a really great job with bringing all the parties together, including the city of Milwaukee's health department, in order to tackle those very, very important issues. Some of the things that we've seen are on our end is our ability to be flexible. And the chairwoman just mentioned, the availability of virtual meetings. We're doing the same thing at Milwaukee County, but in terms of our community-facing services, we've also tried to be very flexible as well. It was at my request that the Department of Public Works implemented the restaurant carryout program, so allowing for some parking locations in Milwaukee to not be used for that purpose, and instead to have carryout options for restaurants, since folks could not go inside of those establishments to make their regular purchases. We're also seeing, of course, the disparate impact of health outcomes in communities of color, low-income communities, as it relates to their health and the impacts of coronavirus. It's hit the African-American community particularly hard. It's hit the Latino community particularly hard. It's hit working class communities like West Dallas, particularly hard. And so those are things we're keeping in mind. Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, has had a budget impact as well, to the tune of $26 million is the projected shortfall that we'll have from the outset of coronavirus up until August. And so that is a piggyback, conversation around the issue of shared revenue, because, as much as Milwaukee County is hurting for that, the city of Milwaukee is hurting for that as well. And it's not just us, it's communities around the state too, that, have these same sort of issues. And some of that, for us is self-inflicted because of our response. We took the action, the mayor did and was supported by the council, to eliminate our parking regulations, which, in turn didn't allow us to collect, parking revenue fares and, parking citations and things like that. So those are all things that we have been hit with, that we're trying to manage in this coronavirus world.
Thank you, Chevy, for those comments. And certainly we've seen huge financial impacts both at the city and the county as a result of responding to COVID. But I want to touch on one of the issues you raised, Chevy, in your comments, which is the deep racial disparities that we saw immediately relative to COVID. And this is something that underscored how deep the wounds of racial injustice are in our community. And it's further underscored as in the last few weeks, we've seen so many people come together in the wake of the murder of George Floyd to demand change and to seek change. I know each of you is committed to addressing issues of racial disparity, injustice, and equities in Milwaukee. Can you share a little bit about your perspectives on this, the work that you're doing, your governmental entities are doing in this space, and perhaps more importantly, how we as community members can best support that work? And I'll begin with Chairwoman Nicholson.
Thank you. So I know you mentioned racial disparities, injustices, and inequities, but I think it's important that we understand that these are all just symptoms of a larger issue called racism. And this is why we declared racism a public health crisis at Milwaukee County in 2019. We first have to admit that it exists. A lot of people think of racism as a few bad actors. I think even currently with the state of things, the conversation around police violence, many people think it's just a few racist cops. But actually, it's its roots permeating these systems. It's structural racism. It's embedded in our practices and in our policies. And this is why it has grown into the monster that it has today. And so that's really what we're committed to at Milwaukee County, dismantling those structural systems that allow racist policies, procedures, and practices to continue moving forward. So what we've done since declaring racism a public health crisis, well, we created a strategic plan for Milwaukee County. This is the first time in 20 years that this has happened. And it wasn't just done by, a few people in the room. This was done by, our employees, by our leaders, by the folks that actually help our county function the way that it needs to. We also trained every single employee on racial equity, and every county leader, departmental leader, and almost every county supervisor has also been trained in racial equity, and just understanding those implicit biases that you may carry even when you don't realize, because those are also a part of why, these sorts of systems have continued to perpetuate. And then we've also implemented an ordinance which formalized and institutionalized that resolution, which allows us to look at current policies and procedures and revise and change the old ones so they align with our goals of achieving racial equity. And this is something we're really committed to doing. And it's obviously personal for me because I grew up in a community that is touted as the most segregated in the nation. But I'm completely optimistic by not only the board's involvement and commitment to this, but also the employees, because when we had the press conference from the ordinance, one employee stood up and she said, "This is the first time in 15 years of working at Milwaukee County that I feel proud to be an employee." And those are the types of stories that we want to continue to hear, and that's how we know we're being successful in this work. And I guess supports from all, just continue to support our efforts, help spread the word, and then challenge us and yourselves also, and how you can help push this work even further.
Terrific, thank you. And David, you want to continue that discussion from the county perspective?
Yeah, so she summed it up very well. And I'm really glad to be walking into an institution that is really taking racial equity as serious as Milwaukee County is. I mean, she talked about the strategic plan. When you look at Milwaukee County vision, it is literally to become the healthiest county in Wisconsin by achieving racial equity. And at this moment, when you think about it, we're in the middle of two pandemics. We have one because of an acute emergency, public health emergency with COVID-19. You have one that's been deeply rooted in racism. And, and what we've seen through COVID-19 has really exacerbated many of the disparities that we see, which largely falls around racial lines, whether we talk about healthcare, whether we talk about incarceration, whether we talk about education. So this is a real opportunity to bring more people to the table, bring more people, more diverse voices to the table, which is something I talked about a lot during my campaign. We need to continue to push the needle on this. Milwaukee is one of the most segregated places in the country, and we lead the country in many different disparities. And not too long ago, we just learned that we have one of the largest disparities in income between Black and white. So we know that we have a long way to go. I'm glad that Milwaukee County has really taken the mantle and pushed this forward. But I want to say that, when we think about COVID-19, when we think about racism, COVID-19 has literally put a pause to everything. There's no more, there's not too many new TV shows coming on. There's no sports, which kind of eliminate the distractions that many people have had around them, so they haven't had to address issues like racism. And so this is an awesome opportunity that we have to address many of the systematic issues that we've seen here in America. And I'm glad that, again, Milwaukee County and the city of Milwaukee are really tackling these issues hand in hand.
Thank you for that. And I think you've spoken really well to why so many of us do have a lot of optimism in this moment of great challenge, that we do have different governmental entities coming together, new leadership coming together, and I think a new awareness and recognition within the broader community of the challenges that exist. So thank you for that. Chevy, you want to speak a little bit from the city's perspective on this as well?
Sure. And for the city of Milwaukee, we've done a similar action in terms of declaring racism a public health issue. I know that in the last term, maybe it's all a blur, so I don't know if it was last year or earlier this year, I had approached our health commissioner about this health in all policies approach, so that when we make ordinances and changes to the way that we conduct business here in the city, that we take into account what the health impacts are going to be. And I know that the health department and the Board of Health here at the city has embraced that and are moving forward with that. I want to touch base on what both the chairwoman and the county executive said as well. The county executive mentioned that in order to have a healthy economy, you have to have healthy people. And a piggyback to that, I think, is if you want to have a healthy society, you have to invest in people. And the county board chairwoman mentioned that all of these are symptomatic issues that result from the root cause of institutional racism. And we're dealing with that on our end in terms of policing. I know it's the hot button topic today, but it's something that really deserves to be looked at. I've said this before, I'll say it now, and I'm sure I'll probably say it again later on, is the fact that the Milwaukee Police Department gobbles up every single tax levy dollar that's available in the city of Milwaukee, and then millions more on top of that. It's hard for us to make the investments on these front end preventative measures that stop people from interacting with the police in a negative fashion down the line in their life anyway, if we're not able to make these front end investments in education, in stable and affordable housing, in healthcare, and all these other social determinants of health that make our community stronger. If we're able to stop that flow of people that are interacting with the police department, then I think we could also have an impact on our court system, and we ultimately could have an impact on the $12 billion annually that the state of Wisconsin spends on the Department of Corrections. I tell people all the time, my brother, my older brother, is a warden in a Wisconsin prison. And I love my brother dearly, but I want to put him out of work. I want to put him out of work by investing on the front end things and things that we know that work. I get kind of sick and tired of, these other task forces and studies and things that, we come out with in order to look at issues that have been present and prevalent in our community for decades. We know what the issues are. Let's have the political will to invest in making those changes happen. And so that's what we're talking about in terms of our police budget in Milwaukee. I know that it's made the news recently about the council's desire to have a study done to take 10% of the police budget and invest it on these front end services. And I'm excited about having that conversation because one, as it relates to police funding, as I said, it's broken. Two, if the state's not going to be a partner in shared revenue like they should be and giving us enough money to pay for these services like they used to in the past, then it's the direction that we have to take. And three, it's redirecting some of these resources into front end measures is the best thing to do for our residents and for our society as a whole. Doing these things, I think, makes not just Milwaukee a better city, but it also makes Wisconsin a better state, and it saves tax dollars down the line for everybody across Wisconsin. So those are some of the things that we're looking at and some of the things that we've done.
Thank you. And, and actually, Chevy, I'm going to come right back to you on this question as well, but you've all done a really great job of sort of summarizing at a micro level things that you're doing to address some of these issues. But I'm going to take a quick second and dive a little bit more deeply into each of your bios, maybe with facts that we didn't highlight earlier in the presentation. But County Executive Crowley, you're the first African-American and the youngest person elected as Milwaukee County Executive in county history. Chairwoman Nicholson, you're the first Latina and African-American woman in the position of board chair. And President Johnson, you're the youngest African-American to ever serve as president of the Common Council. So what does it feel like to be a young, diverse leader in Milwaukee at this time? And what does it say about Milwaukee that you all have just been elected to serve and to lead us?
Well, I think, right now, to be in the position that I'm in, that Marcelia's in, and that David's in, it probably feels like out of the frying pan and into the fire, jumping, right into the eye of the storm. I mean, who knew, that when we took office in these positions, that we'd be in the middle of a global health pandemic. Mm-hmm. We have these budgeting issues that have resulted from it. And then on top of that, you'd have these protests, these nationwide protests and global protests, really, for social and racial justice. Nobody knew. So I feel like for us, it's kind of like that we're being tried right now. And if we can handle this, then we can handle anything, right? So that's what I feel like right now. But I think that when you look at Marcelia, when you look at David, and when you look at me, and when you look at our stories, we didn't come from privileged upbringings. We didn't come from families that had, big names in politics. We didn't have money. Many of us have faced evictions and hardships. We know what it's like to be hungry. We know what it's like to have our belongings on the street. We know what it's like to have the lights turned out and no heat when it's cold. We know what it's like to travel long distances in order to get to school every single day. We know what it's like to not have work or to not have parents working. And I think that when we tell our stories to our constituents and they see us, they can see themselves in us. They can see, for many of them who are seniors, they can see their kids and their grandkids in us. And I think that they elected us to these positions, not just, for Marcelia or mine that had to go through, our peers, but they elected us to the positions to serve because they see the hope in the future. And that is the most promising thing to me. I said it at the top of my remarks here. I am, always so thrilled and so privileged, honestly privileged, to be on panel discussions with these two, because I think that, together we've got a tremendous upside to do some positive things for Milwaukee City, Milwaukee County, and the state of Wisconsin as a whole. And so I'm very privileged, and I thank, all of our constituents for sending all of us to these positions at this moment.
Chairwoman?
That was so beautiful. And
You're welcome.
I think President Johnson beautifully outlined everything that I could have said. I guess I would just add that what we lack in age, we make up for in experience. And it really is those experiences of our childhood and growing up in, you know, the most segregated, impoverished, incarcerated zip code that allow us to, I think, truly represent the people of Milwaukee County within the city of Milwaukee, because we understand how it feels to be at the bottom, and we know what people need to be able to thrive. And I've said this before, there are a lot of well-intentioned people in government, but if they don't really understand the consequences of their decisions, they can't really make them to the full capacity. And so I do think that's why our peers did elect us, me and President Johnson specifically. And I would just say, I think it also speaks to the fact that people are just ready to challenge the status quo. When I was running for this position, it was a very, it was a kind race. I challenged a 20-year incumbent, but it was a kind race because they told me, although you both have a lot of great experiences, we know that you will challenge the status quo. We know you will say no when you need to say no. We know you will work for the people that we represent best. And so I was really honored to be elected to this position, and even more honored to be elected 3 times now by my district, my constituency, and 2 times unopposed. And so I'm just committed to continuing this work. And it really is, like President Johnson said, it's a privilege not only to stand next to President Johnson and County Executive Crowley, but just in front of you all, in front of my constituents. And I tell myself all the time, I don't know how I got here, but I'm here, and I'm going to give it my all. So thanks.
County Executive?
Thank you. I don't even know what to add to the president and chairwoman's thoughts and response to this, but when I first ran for this seat, one of the things that I realized is that how little people really know about Milwaukee County. And to go with what Chevy was just saying, like, I was able to utilize my hardships and my experience for people to understand what services Milwaukee County provides. So when you think about evictions, when you think about not having any food, I was able to talk about that because not only did I receive services, growing up from Milwaukee County, I also had the opportunity to provide those same services when I worked for Milwaukee County. And when I think about that particular question, I think I like to think about it now, particularly in this COVID-19 times, right? And everybody's like, well, how do you feel about this? Do you want the job now, right? Because so much is happening. And I tell everybody, I didn't choose this time. The times chose me. And I think that when I look at that, I have to rise to the occasion for this community. We need leadership. We need somebody that's going to fight for this community. But at the same time, I'm not in this boat by myself, because when you think about COVID-19, we've all had to lean on one another in some capacity. So we're all rising to this occasion. And I also think that this marks a moment for Milwaukee. We talked about this being one of the most segregated. We talked about the disparities. And I think that right now, when you think about what happened during this COVID-19 spring election and how I not only won, but now you have both the chairwoman and president and their roles, this shows that we are charting a new route for Milwaukee County. And I think that people are opening their eyes. Again, the distractions are no longer there, but we also have to do our due diligence. We didn't have a honeymoon period. And I think that, this is really about how we are going to continue to hit the ground running. And because we are young, we are millennials, and we're African-American, we know that all eyes are on us. Everybody's going to be hanging on every word, everything that we do. And so I think it's extremely important that we continue to have conversations as leaders so we can be in that good headspace, because we need that self-care too. But also think that as long as we continue to lean on one another, continue to invest in those coming after us, we're gonna again chart a new territory for Milwaukee County. Again, this is an exciting opportunity, and we have to look at this as an opportunity in these challenging times. Because if we don't, we won't be able to build back better, as Senator Tammy Baldwin would say. And I think we have that opportunity here in the Midwest because we have our Lake Michigan, because we're thinking differently about race. This is the first county who made racism a public health crisis. And I think that's telling to a lot of people. And now that we have, when you think about the city and the county, 3 out of the 4 people in major roles leading the charge are African American, I think that sends a message that Milwaukee is on a better track.
Well, thank you. I think all 3 of you have just articulated beautifully why Milwaukee is so lucky to have you all and your leadership in this moment. So thank you all in advance.
Thank you.
Indeed, and that leadership has certainly been put to the test in the first few months with these key challenges. But as each of you have indicated, there's long-term needs to invest in our community, and there's long-term needs that have existed for a long time to figure out how do we better fund that investment. And prior to the pandemic, prior to the safer at home transition, there was a public hearing in Madison about legislation that would enable the county and through the county, the city, to levy a 1% sales tax increase, which would provide an opportunity for both property tax relief as well as critical funding for public services. And what we've seen in the last couple of months, I think, just further underscores the need for that. But I'd like to get your thoughts and perspectives on this approach to public funding and public investment. And I'd like to start with the county executive.
Great question, James. I think at the end of the day, we have to continue to have this conversation, especially during this COVID-19 times. Like, how do we give local municipalities that direct and flexible funding that they need? And when I think about the sales tax, if we would have had that right now, Milwaukee County wouldn't be doing the heavy lifting that we are doing just to get over this pandemic. This is an opportunity for us to make sure that local municipalities can come up with local solutions. We can't continue to go to the state of Wisconsin, go into the federal government saying, give our municipalities money. And I say that because the issues that we're facing here in Milwaukee County is just not a Milwaukee County problem. It is a 72 county problem. And so when you think about the issue of shared revenue, not bringing in enough revenues to actually provide for the needs of the people that you represent, this is a statewide problem. And I think that it's extremely important that Milwaukee does everything that we can do here locally to continue to bridge those gaps, but also bridging that gap and building relationships with the municipalities across the state of Wisconsin. One, so they understand that we are in this fight with them. And Milwaukee, we fight a lot by ourselves. And we've become the political lightning rod for a very long time. But now, because of these times, because of the issues, many folks are sharing that burden along with us. And so it's about how do we build back better. But it's about how we could become more sustainable with our ask so we don't have to continue to go back. And I think that, having a sales tax, giving municipalities the ability to spend their own dollars in the most flexible and direct way is the way to go. And I think COVID-19 has really exacerbated the fact that we absolutely need it.
Great. Thank you for that. And Sherwin, would you like to add any further comments relative to the county's perspective on this funding?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll add that this 1% sales tax is us not asking for a handout, but for the ability to implement local solutions. We have innovative ideas. We have innovative solutions. But our only tool that we have in our box is to raise property taxes. Right now, we are tied for the 5th highest property taxes in the nation, not in the state, but in the nation. That's no good. That means that our taxpayers are investing in more than what they're gaining back. And I spoke to the shortfall that we're experiencing every year, the $20 to $30 million shortfall. That means every year we're looking at cutting bus routes. We're looking at parks not being able to be cleaned and maintained, and the grasses not being mowed. We're talking about services that we can't give to our most vulnerable citizens, our seniors, and our people that need housing security, who need access to rent assistance and other things that we are state mandated to provide. And so it's essential that we get this tool so that we can raise the revenue that we need to continue providing services to our constituents, but also improving on the services that we're providing for our constituents. And, we just have to continue to call on the state legislature. And I guess one call for those who are participating in this event today is that call up your state representative and let them know that you need them to support Milwaukee County in this effort, because it's really the only thing that we have right now to make sure that we can do what we have to do for our community.
Well said, and it really is about our community investing in itself and being given the tools to do that. Chevy.
Yeah, and thank you. The chairwoman just talked about going to the state and folks on this call asking your elected representatives in Madison to speak up on this behalf. I've encouraged my constituents who, time and again when I do my community meetings, I have to educate them on the fact that there's the state, there's county government, and then there's city, right? So we're not at the top of the food chain. We can't solve every single issue. One of the things that a little anecdote, I guess, is because I've got these large thoroughfares that run through my district here in the city, and people complain to me often about the medians not being cut or the grass along the freeway exits, the Fond du Lac Expressway not being cut. And I tell them that's not the city's purview. That is the county's purview by way of the state, the Department of Transportation. And so when I passed the resolution here at the council to send to the state to ask the DOT secretary to send more money back to Milwaukee County in order to take care of that, we did some more research and found that the Department of Transportation at the state, and this isn't just in Governor Evers' administration, this was true in administrations prior as well, they send just as much money back to Milwaukee County to do that service as they do every other county. And I'm thinking to myself, my aldermanic district alone has over 40,000 people. That's more than some counties in Wisconsin. Yet we get the same amount of money as the tiniest county in the state to do the same work. And the city of Milwaukee has 10% of the entire state population. That doesn't make much sense to me. And Milwaukee County has a sixth of the state's population. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So I think, as the county executive said, coronavirus has just exposed the fact that this cookie cutter approach to funding local governments in Wisconsin just doesn't work. This other analogy that I like to use is that, Wisconsin, the state government is the parent, right? And the local governments are the kids. And I'm thinking about my own experience, and I got some brothers and sisters who are years younger than I am. And even my own kids, I got 3 kids myself. I have a 9-year-old and 2 2-year-olds. You don't treat your older kid, you don't treat the adolescent the same way you treat the younger kids. I don't treat Oliver, who's 9, the same way that I treat Madison and Bella, who are 2. Milwaukee is the adolescent. Milwaukee's the big kid in the room. You need to let Milwaukee go and work. You need to let Milwaukee go and hang out with friends. You need to let Milwaukee, kick it a little bit. And you can't do that with some of these other municipalities, but the state has to open their eyes up and recognize. And when we talk about, the mowing aspect, just think about our public transit system as well. It's mind-boggling to me that it costs just as much to ride a bus in Milwaukee County as it does to ride the subway in New York City. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And we don't have a dedicated funding source for our transportation system, yet family supporting jobs are ringing around the city in the WOW counties, in Ozaukee, Washington, and Waukesha counties. So we need fully funded and far-reaching public transit as well. But the only way we get there is if we have action from the parent. If the parents listen to the adolescent in the room saying, "Hey, we need some additional help."
Well, thank you for
Putting
that.
us on punishment.
Yeah, right. And we ain't even do.
And that investment's a win-win, right? The ability for us to be able to invest in our community strengthens all of Wisconsin. We in southeastern Wisconsin are the economic engine that drives everything that happens in the state from that perspective, and drives a lot of tax revenue for the state. And so the ability for us to invest locally, as each of you has said, not only improves the quality of life for us locally, it also improves the economic conditions for the state. So a quick reminder to everybody that we are taking questions in the Q&A area, and we want to turn to one of those. A couple of questions have touched on the issue of evictions, generally in the city and in the county, but particularly around the challenges arising because of the pandemic. And I think this is an area I'd like to start with the county side. the county executive and the county board chairwoman, because the county has announced a program and really already quickly implemented at the beginning of a program to tackle this very issue. And so, David, maybe we'll start with you on that.
Absolutely. So I love the fact that when people want to bring up evictions, it's near and dear to me, because growing up, we faced a lot of evictions. And we know that if you've ever read the book Evicted, when you think about racism in general, we've been locking more Black men up, and yet we've been locking more Black women and their families out. So eviction is something that we have to continue to tackle. And we've been able to do that, again, because of COVID-19, but also it's just making sure that we're making decisions and tackling issues through a racial equity lens as well. And so when the rent moratorium was lifted back in May, we knew that we needed to do something very quickly because people were already filing to have evictions go forward. And so when those funds became available, if I'm not mistaken, that was June 11th, we had over 900 people, 900 folks, households that applied for these dollars. Unfortunately, $10 million just going into there is definitely not enough. And it's barely scratching the surface, which will help about 2,000 families. They'll be able to get about up to $3,000 to help with their rent. And so we want to make sure that they qualify and that, you know, the burden is because of COVID-19, so we can help these individuals out. So $7 million will go particularly towards rent assistance. You have $2 million that will go particularly towards housing acquisition. So Milwaukee County can start to buy buildings, buy housing to actually put folks into there, which also fits into our long-term planning when you think about ending chronic homelessness, which we've been doing great at as well. But also, and then the rest of that money will go towards mortgages, folks who are having some financial troubles and paying for the home that they own. And so we know that it's barely scratching the surface. I know the city of Milwaukee has some dollars. The state of Wisconsin has put $25 million towards that. But we're going to continue to plug along and do whatever we can. But again, you know, this is really about how do we bring back those direct and flexible resources from the feds, from the state level, because local governments like City of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County have been on the front lines of this and will continue to be on the front lines post-pandemic.
And I'll just say that the speed at which the county was able to operate on this was really pretty incredible. It was an innovative approach, and you made an immediate difference between developing the policy, the board approving and moving that forward, and then the fact that lives were changed and impacted almost literally within 24 hours of passage is really pretty incredible. And thank you, Nikki.
I have to at least acknowledge that, you know, when people look at Milwaukee County government, they never seen the partnership that could be created between the county exec's office and the county board. And so the fact that, you know, the chairwoman has been a phenomenal partner and really trying to get a lot of this moving forward, you know, because I know that I'm gonna have to lean heavily on the county board and they want to see things happen as well. So it's been extremely important. And we've been very intentional and strategic in making sure that we're working hand in hand together, especially when you think about the community response related to COVID-19.
Thanks, County Executive. And I think I want to build on the point that you just made with our next Q&A from the audience, which is on the theme of partnership. Obviously, you just talked about a new level of partnership and cooperation between yourself and the chairwoman. And I think we also are so hopeful to see that now with all of your leadership between the city and the county. So again, we've got just a couple of minutes here, but would you all mind touching very briefly on your intent to start building stronger relationships between city and county to help really realize the full potential of different projects and initiatives for Milwaukee? President Johnson, can I start with you?
Sure, and thank you for that question. I think it's a great question, especially considering that, you know, we're all really on one team. You know, all of us have to work together. I can say that, and it's been reported on already, that, you know, David, Marcelia, and myself, we're friends. We know each other. Our kids play together, you know, for those of us that have kids, you know. So there's going to be some intentionality for us to be able to work together. We already have, you know, conversations almost weekly, I feel like, with each other on a host of issues, and we're going to continue doing that and working together. When you look at even the the county's flexibility and putting out their housing assistance program that echo what the state is doing. The city of Milwaukee is looking at doing something very similar. We're putting the finishing touches on that, so that'll be coming out pretty soon. So I think that's an example of the synergy that is available between our two bodies and with all three of us in the positions that we're in right now. And in the last thing that I talked about in terms of shared revenue, you notice that I didn't go specifically to a city concern. I talked about public transit, right? That is a county concern. And so I think the more you have people from even different levels of government speaking to these matters, speaking to these issues that affect all of our citizens collectively, I think you're going to have some progress and partnership, even without having to come to a room to try to put these things together. It's innate. It happens genuinely and automatically. That's because I think all of us are in tune with what the chairwoman mentioned, our upbringing and how our positions would put us in a position to be able to affect the policies to have a positive impact on the people that we all serve.
Chairwoman, anything to add to that?
Thank you. Yes, I'll be brief. I'll just be brief and add that I think it's very important that we work together. And I think you'll already start to see some instances where that has occurred. Just at the end of our last term, the joint task force on racial and climate equity was created between the county and the city of Milwaukee. You have the Office on African American Affairs. That's a joint effort with the county and the city of Milwaukee. And then you also have the doula program that grew out of a county initiative that also got some work with the city. And I would just say that I think it's important that we continue to do that, because if we continue to operate in these silos, then we will miss those opportunities to work together and leverage the resources that we have. We've talked extensively about the fact that we lack resources. So if we can work together and not duplicate some of the same initiatives, then we can save some money in that way. With that in mind, I created the One Milwaukee Task Force at the end of our last term. And for the first time, representatives from the city of Milwaukee, Milwaukee County, and Milwaukee Public Schools District, the superintendent and the president of their school board, sat down and started to talk about ways that we could coordinate services, whether it's maintenance of shared parks, or if it's professional development for mental health professionals that the county refers to MPS, and so on and so on. And so I really hope with this new transition of Common Council president, school board directors, and then also the county executive, that we can use this as a vehicle moving forward to continue to collaborate.
Great. County executive.
Yes, thank you. And I mean, in general, we're in the COVID-19 crisis, and it forces all of us to kind of come to the table. If you really want to get over this pandemic, and we want to make sure that we can rebuild this economy that's equitable for everybody, we need everybody at the table. And I think that even with COVID-19, because there is a limited amount of resources, it kind of forces all municipalities to kind of find out, how do we absolutely complement one another, and we're moving from a place where it was always competing with one another. And I think that right now, these times have really created an opportunity for us to do this. And not only just with us three, because I've been in constant communications, even with the mayor, about what can we do to help leverage as much resources as possible for those who absolutely need it. And so these are the times for us to do it. Because again, if the tide rises, we need all the boats to rise. And so this is about how we're going to lean on one another. And these the COVID-19 crisis, as well as the pandemic of racism, is really forcing us to do that. And I'm glad to see that we're all rising to this occasion.
Terrific, thank you. Well, this has been a wonderful hour, and I have so enjoyed spending time with all three of you, and I know that our attendees and participants have as well. We do want to be sensitive to your time as well as to everybody's. You have a lot on your plates, as we've heard about during this last hour. We did have a number of great questions from participants that we were not able to get to. We will perhaps work with you on developing some answers to that. And we can, all of the participants, you'll be getting an email after later this week with a recap of this event, and we'll work to address some of those additional questions as part of that communication as well. So I want to close by thanking each one of you for taking time to be with us today. Thank you for your leadership, your collaboration, and everything you're doing to help move our community forward. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for having us, James. Thanks.
Thank you all. We appreciate you taking the time and everyone else taking the time to tune in today. So thank you all for sharing this hour with us. And again, for your leadership on behalf of Milwaukee. Have a great day.